Hello, everyone. My name's Andrew, as you may or may not know. I was assigned the hydrological hazards. So, just give it a start. We're gonna start with the puns. It's gonna be a deep dive into the causes, impacts, and some mitigation strategies, and we'll look at some case studies involving hydrological hazards. So, as the name implies, a hydrological hazard is a hazard that refers to the natural events that are related to water that cause damage to the environment, infrastructure, and human life. These hazards often occur due to the dynamics of water movement, flooding, droughts, landslides, and tsunamis. Hurricanes would also be included. Uh, Now, droughts might be sound like, well, that's a lack of water. So how is that a hydrologic hazard? Well, the lack of water can also cause a hazard still involving water. So the other end of we have extremes. Extreme water, no water. Uh, and we're going to try to understand the causes and impacts these hazards have, why they're crucial for disaster management. So when we talk about hydrological hazards, the first one we're going to talk about is can be natural or man-made, where we're looking at flooding, which could be coastal floods, river floods, or even flash floods. Flash flood being when there's a sudden surge of water from due to just inundation of water, rain within a region. Flooding can be caused by heavy rainfall, uh, the melting of snow, storm surges, and dam failures. Now, I'm a Floridian. I've experienced the consequences of hydrologic hazards. The last hurricanes that rolled through, one of our fire stations flooded and cannot be used anymore. They've been having to respond almost two first alarms away from their uh, from their old station, uh, which can cause other issues with response. And if there's a structure fire in their first due, what their old first due. It's going to take longer to get there. May make it to a situation that we have to go strictly defensive. The impacts of flooding, of course, is loss of life. I mean, we saw in cases of Hurricane Katrina when the levees broke, the loss of life, people dying because they can't escape the floodwaters, people being displaced because their homes are destroyed or no longer considered livable, a breakdown of infrastructure. So, flooding gets to a point where people and goods can no longer traverse in the area, and also waterborne diseases. Uh, People might not think of it, but malaria in ways is a waterborne disease. We look at the incubation of mosquitoes. They're they have to they survive in still water. Well, if there's areas of high flooding and that results in water that eventually is stagnant, there can be a growth in the mosquito population, therefore a growth in the potential for malaria and diseases like West Nile. Now, I talked about there's two ends of the spectrum. There's the spectrum of lots of rain, flooding, but also we look at drought, where there's expanded extended periods of deficient rainfall. Now, this can lead to crop failure, water scarcity, and food insecurity. Um, but drought can also cause, breakdown of stability in a region because, there's food insecurity. People might rely on their own means to survive. And if you look at it from a firefighting point of view, if there's poor water supply in the region, especially if you're in a region that's more rural, the ability to fight fire have a hydrological hazard become a fire hazard. Um, I'm also going to bring up landslides. Now, landslides sorry, I'm getting my notes together. A landslide is basically the movement of earth because the ground is inundated with water and loose. It results in soil erosion, property destruction, and loss of life, and can be sudden. Uh, Now one of our classmates is talking about tectonic hazards, and earthquakes on their own can cause mass destruction, but major uh another major hazard that they can cause is a tsunami, which is just a massive wave that will flood coastal waters. We saw the the result of earthquakes causing tsunamis both in Fukushima in Japan, which led to a nuclear hazard. And we also saw that without sufficient warning systems, catastrophic loss of life that had occurred in Indonesia in 2004. Now, what causes hazards? It can be natural causes, heavy rainfall, ocean currents, changes in the climate that can cause storms to be deadlier. We can see that climate change intensifies extreme weather patterns, and this can contribute more frequent and severe hydrological hazards. But hydrological hazards can also be induced. The more development of land we see, we can see the development of improper drainage systems and the disruption of natural floodplains. Uh, Deforestation is a human-induced cause that affects the water absorption and soil erosion, making landslide more probable. And even at can be there can be human causes of hydrological hazards from engineering failures. We've seen dams break in the past that have caused flooding in other areas. And of course, if you could argue climate change caused by human activities is altering weather patterns, causing more like the increased likelihood of rain and flooding and hydrological hazards. We'll go to case studies. Obviously, Hurricane Katrina, we saw heavy rains and storm surge that overwhelmed levees that caused catastrophic flooding in New Orleans and the greater Gulf Coast region. It was one that personally, uh, I'm someone who goes to New Orleans constantly. I've gone every year since I was 16 years old, so in 12 years I've gone at least once every year. And you can still see that the infrastructure of the city isn't fully repaired. It still hasn't returned to the former glory that New Orleans was prior to Hurricane Katrina. So we can see that hydrological hazards, though often are very, very quick and decisive, like quick surges of water, we can see that it has long-lasting effects. Uh, as I mentioned before, the tsunami in Japan was caused by a massive earthquake. We had a waves over 40 meters tall, where 15,000 people lost their lives, and there was the nuclear crisis due to the nuclear reactor in Fukushima being affected by the storms that makes rendered that area uninhabitable. So again, we're looking at events that are causing long-term effects. And again, I talk about that spectrum. On the other end, there's been drought in the Horn of Africa that has caused famine and widespread food insecurity in nations like Kenya, Somalia, Ethiopia. And you look at Somalia. Somalia is already a region that is plagued with instability. The, the famine brought on by the drought causes the warlords to utilize this desperation and instability that's worsened by the famine. It's a region that has a very hard time stabilizing because of hydrological causes. So we talk about the impacts. There's environmental impacts, soil erosion, loss of biodiversity, destruction of natural habitats, and then we have risks of alteration of water quality. We have socioeconomic impacts, damage to the infrastructure, homes, roads, bridges, people who lose their livelihoods, they leave land that they've lived there, them and their family have lived on for years. And then we have economic costs and recovery rebuilding. And we have health impacts where we have spread of waterborne diseases like cholera, malaria, dysentery, and the mental health of issues caused by trauma from losing your home, loved ones. What can we do to mitigate this? We have flood management. We can have early warning systems, better drainage systems, reinforcing existing levees, and better floodplain zoning. Drought management, we can practice better water conservation, create bioengineer drought-resistant crops, and better manage our water resources. Tsunami warning systems, as we saw in 2004, there was a lot of the death was caused because Indonesia lacked early warning systems. So developing real-time monitoring of seismic activities and sea level rises can mitigate tsunami issues. And climate change, we can adapt by reducing our greenhouse emissions, strengthening resilience in vulnerable communities, and having sustainable land and water practices. Conclusion, hydrological hazards, water, or extreme lack thereof. We can see even recently the Palisades fire, where they have had severe drought causing the inability to fight fire, strong winds causing spread of fire. Um, it's just understanding that the causes impacts and develop mitigation strategies and be ready for hydrological hazards. And that's all I really got. I open the floor to any questions.